area. Turkish people, bless them, weren't here yet. And so this is Rome, especially along the coast, owned by Rome. And so from here on, he's called Paul. Paul, before he was Saul of Tarsus, now he's Paul. And he took that name. Now again, I wasn't there, but that's my guess. But it is factual that after he's with Sergius Paulus, he's with a guy named Paul, the authority, from then on he takes the name Paul. And that'd be a great blessing. And so they go through the area, Cyprus, the island where Barnabas comes from, and then they go into the land. Paul was raised here, and in the second missionary journey, third, they'll go there, in Tarsus. Paul was raised Paul of Tarsus. But they go then into this area, St. Paul's general area, and they go into these cities, Iconium, Lystra, Derbe, Antioch, and Paul is stoned in Lystra. He's stoned, but the Lord raises him, and notice, and then they go back. They don't go through Cyprus again. But notice the first missionary journey, Acts 13 and 14, it's like an L. You go this way and up and back. First missionary journey. Okay, next. Now, we believe he probably wrote the epistle to the Galatians between the first and second missionary journey and before what we call Acts 15, before the Jerusalem Council, because when he's arguing that the Gentiles are not under the Jewish ceremonial laws, if the Jerusalem Council had met already, where they voted and the apostles said the Gentiles are not under all these hundreds of laws, he would have said that, but he never mentions that. But he says so quickly, he says, I've just preached to you the grace of Christ, and you're not under the law, meaning you don't get to heaven and righteous by God by saying, I've obeyed all. The Jews counted 613 laws. I obeyed every law. Let me go to heaven when I die. Paul said, we're all sinners. We're under grace. And he said, the Gentiles are not under the Jewish laws to keep kosher food. You don't have to keep kosher food. You don't have to visit Jerusalem 3 times a year. You know, people say, I keep all the law. Why? You go to Jerusalem 3 times a year? Oh, no, I don't keep that law. You know, they keep certain. Yeah. You eat shrimp? Well, I don't know about that. You know. Anyway, he wrote Galatians in the second missionary journey, and we see the pattern, by the way. He's sent by a local church, and he comes back and he reports each time. He goes back to Antioch. So the second missionary journey, remember there was a little difficulty with Paul and Barnabas, so it's Paul, Silas, and Timothy go on the next missionary journey. And they leave, they go from Antioch, and they go back to the Galatian church. A lot of maps have Galatia here, but today we think that Galatia is that whole area. It's the area he covered in his first missionary journey, and it happens to be north where there's hardly any people. But when he wrote to the Galatians, Paul's epistle to the Galatians is to the people he preached the gospel to on the first missionary journey, his converts. And he said, you're not under the law. But his second missionary journey, notices he goes to Galatia again. It shows you he follows up. He just doesn't win them to Christ and say, I'll never see you again. So he goes through Galatia, and then you remember he wanted to go. It says, we sought to go into Mysia, and then he wanted to go east. And it says the Spirit forbade us. Now, we don't know if things happened or if he heard the voice, but he said the Spirit forbade us, and in a dream, he saw a Greek from Macedonia, Philippi, who said, come and help us. Come over and help us. And he said, we realized that God wanted us to go into Macedonia. And now, notice the great decision that's involved. Paul wanted to go eastward, and if he went eastward, the gospel would have gone first into Asia. But God, in his sovereign decision, knowing the future, knowing prayer, God said the gospel will go into Europe. And by the way, very soon, it also went into Africa, and as I told you, with Tom, with others, Africa until about 650 North Africa was a Christian world. North Africa was a Christian world until the Muslims basically erased it, most of it. But so he goes into Macedonia, this area, not to be confused, Macedonia today is more over here, but he goes into here, the various cities, Neapolis and Philippi. He goes to Philippi, and remember we have years later, he writes the letter to the Philippians. But Philippi, named for Philip, the Greek king. Philippi is where they discovered gold. It changed the history. They discovered gold here in Macedonia, and when they discovered gold there, Philip of Macedon made it a city because he wanted the gold, and you have to watch the gold miners and count the gold and store it and guard it. And the gold that was discovered in Philippi financed Alexander the Great's armies. History would have been different if they didn't discover gold in Philippi. But they discovered gold in Philippi, and suddenly Philip and then his son Alexander the Great, the greatest conqueror of world history, Alexander had enough money to buy legions of soldiers, to pay soldiers well, to buy bow and arrows, to buy swords, to buy javelins, to buy horses, to buy mules, to buy carts, to buy everything he wanted. And he took his army and conquered Babylon and Persia and Egypt, the greatest conqueror of world history. When I was in the army, I was a private. At the age of 23, everybody's cursing you, yelling at you, saying you're nothing but trash. Basic training. It rolls off you. That doesn't mean it. Okay, we'll stop. Tell an army story. Anyway, I said someday, I thought Alexander the Great was conquering the world at my age, and here I'm nobody private. So I said someday I'm going to be an officer, and I became an officer. But anyway, the gold in Philippi.